Just give us your sense of what you are feeling about this conflict and where it goes from here after hearing what you've just heard, and indeed after the images that have emerged from Gaza overnight from that hospital.
Well, I mean, the reality over the last 12 days, I think, is the most significant escalation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that I can remember, and that people far older than me can as well. We already have, it looks like as of today, casualties of both Palestinians and of Israelis that have eclipsed the entire 5-year period of the Second Intifada almost 2 decades ago. So that shows you in 12 days to have that level of loss of life, the intensity of this. And you mentioned the images. We are a community of Israelis and Palestinians who work together, who are working for equality, for peace, for security for both peoples. And the images that our community has been exposed to, like other Israelis and Palestinians, are devastating. This is a war being fought in an era of social media. And as much as you might try and avoid it, people are seeing incredibly traumatic things, which are really scarring, I think, on Israelis and Palestinians over the long term.
So we've had this attack on a hospital. There are claims about how many people have died and counterclaims to that, of who is responsible for that, of where it hit, of where it was fired from. What is the importance of getting to the bottom of that ahead of a diplomatic visit by Joe Biden today?
I'm not sure that we're going to have consensus on what happened before President Biden's plane touches down in Israel, but I think it's incredibly important that we do find out exactly what happened. We have, again, even in our community, very distinct understandings or assumptions over what took place last night.
What do you think happened? What are you hearing happened? I mean, obviously we are in the realms of claim and counterclaim, so you're not. You are entitled to tell us what you've heard. What have you heard?
I've heard what you just heard from the IDF spokesperson. Okay. I've also heard equally as clear and certain claims that it was an Israeli airstrike. I want to be very clear. I don't know, and I don't trust people who are telling me that they know certainly, and I think it's incredibly important we find out. So I would echo the calls from Chancellor Scholz, from the British Foreign Secretary, from President Macron, that there's an independent inquiry to ascertain what happened. And it's not just important because of the truth. It's important because of a level of trust that needs to now be rebuilt. If you remember the devastating Hamas attacks on October 7th, there was this social media reaction by some supporters of Hamas of claiming that things that people had seen had not taken place, and this fog of war and denial of very, very serious crimes and the loss of civilian life. Now, we need to try and find a common basis of fact and understanding between Israelis and Palestinians and their network of supporters internationally for us to be able to move beyond this, because otherwise it's like a Rorschach test, right? And you will have further polarization on the ground as well as those internationally, and much less chance of being able to rebuild the partnership that ultimately is going to be necessary at the end of all of this.
Well, Major Doran Spillman, who you just heard from, didn't indicate at all when this would be over, what the end game is. What do you think it's likely to be? And how can groups like yours hope to help with that?
I mean, first of all, organization, we have over 160 members who are a part of ALLMEP, and they've been rallying Israelis and Palestinians together to provide humanitarian aid to people who are being caught up in this absolute nightmare, and really showing that level of solidarity, which I think is what we need to try and scale. But they and I have no idea how long this is going to go on for. I mean, the level of human life being lost day by day, hour by hour, is on a scale we've never seen before in Israel-Palestine. So the longer the duration of this, the greater the human toll, the greater the regional instability as well. There are genuine concerns that this could very quickly escalate into a regional war, which would have ramifications not just for Israelis and Palestinians, but for the entire Middle East and even for us in Europe. So we are urging, there's a Security Council meeting later today, there needs to be very urgent diplomatic action to try and find an off-ramp for all this. And the other thing I would say is for the international community to look itself in the mirror and say, what have we been doing over the last decade to avoid this moment arriving? There has been a deprioritization of this conflict, a sense that it could be managed. That must be over. This needs to be resolved, because the human catastrophe is awful, but also for all of us, regionally, globally, the instability that can be generated from this conflict has profound geopolitical consequences.
Thank you very much, John.